Welcome to today's Proverbs devotional. If these devotionals have been impactful to you in some way, please like and share those on your social media platform. With that in mind, I want us to look at Proverbs chapter 16, verse 32. Here's what it says. Better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes the city. Now, weekly, I meet with our staff, and when I'm meeting with our staff, we deal with various issues. We go through a book, we talk about leadership issues, and today we happen to be talking about the idea of managing conflict, dealing with conflict. As a pastor and dealing with people, you're always going to deal with a certain level of conflict, whether it's refereeing a conflict or someone's mad at you or you have internal conflict within a board or a staff. You're just managing those things. It's a tension to be managed. You can't always solve it. And oftentimes in life that takes shape. We get in situations where we find conflict, whether it be at home or work. So as we talk today, I jotted down a few notes that I taught our staff today that I want to talk to you regarding conflict, because I think this is what Proverbs 16 is really telling us. It's better to be a person who has self-control than to get the win. That's the idea of a warrior taking a city, is to get the win. And I think oftentimes when it comes to conflict, we're trying to win and not necessarily solve the issue. So here are a few notes I jotted down. I want you to follow along with me. Number one, connect before you correct. Now, this is something that I brought up when we were talking about parenting yesterday, but I think it's true in conflict as well. We've got to do our best to connect to the person that we're correcting. And here's why. I think by connecting with the person, it actually humanizes that person, and we no longer see them as the other or the enemy, but we see them as a fellow human being that we're just trying to develop and encourage and get along with. And so I always try to connect in different ways. I ask about people's home life. I might notice their shoes and say, man, those are cool shoes. Where did you get them? I may ask them about what they had for lunch. Any way that I can get a normal conversation flowing before I get into the conflict is the best way to handle conflict, because it humanizes them. Second, you got to do this. Think the best of the person, not the worst. Now, I will admit, when I'm dealing with a pretty sticky situation, I have to really discipline myself here. Because oftentimes when we're in conflict with people, we think that we're right and they're wrong, right? That's why the conflict has arisen. And so what I try to do, and I try to teach the guys working for me, is think the best of those people. They're not the devil. They're not the demon. They're not the enemy. They're another human being with maybe a different perspective on the issue. So I always try to think the best of them. These are people who have families. These are people who work hard. These are people who serve in the church. These are people who are spending countless hours to work on a board. So I always try to think the best of them and not the worst. And when I can do this properly, then all of a sudden the conflict gets easier to deal with, right? Because I'm thinking we're after the same goals. And I typically will say that we're trying to get to the same thing. Like if I'm working with people in church and we have conflict, I always try to start there. Hey, our goal is to make more and better disciples, and I know you want that and I want that. So let's kind of deal with this conflict so that we can do that more effectively. The third thing is this. Never deal with a conflict when your emotions are hot. Never deal with a conflict when your emotions are hot. Think about it this way. I was taught this. I don't know if modern cars are this way or not, because I don't work on cars anymore, but I had a beater of a car when I was first driving at 16, and every now and then it needed fluid in the radiator. Well, you never want to put fluid in a radiator when the car has been running, because it's gonna blow up on you. The steam's gonna release and you're gonna get burned in a bad way. I think the same thing is true when you're dealing with conflict when your emotions are hot. Does that make sense? So for instance, if you've had a bad day or you've had a bad meeting or maybe you've gotten a bad report, those are not the times you really want to deal with conflict. You want to deal with conflict when you're clear-headed and you're in well control of your emotions. So take a walk, take a day, take a moment before you deal with conflict. That way you don't hurt somebody in the process, that you don't blow up. Because oftentimes if we're emotional about other things, that gets carried over into the conflict. The next thing I would advise is this: seek to understand before being understood. I think this is what the proverb writer is trying to say. A warrior is hardwired to win. Does that make sense? And the proverb writer says, no, wisdom is to be self-controlled, to be patient. It's not about winning. And that's the case here. We want to understand what the conflict is about. We want to understand the person. We want to understand their methods to what they're doing in regards to the conflict. So you want to seek to understand. You don't want to be the person who comes right out and tries to win the argument. You want to know what the argument is about. You want to know why maybe they're passionate about that, maybe why they're frustrated about that. So you lead with asking questions like, how does that make you feel? Or why did you see it that way? And you're trying to understand what the conflict is completely about. Here's another thing that I think is really important. Focus on what the conflict is about. Look, I've done enough marriage counseling to know that it is a penalty to bring something up 6 months ago if that's not what the issue that you're dealing with right now is about. Does that make sense? So I've dealt with marriages, couples where they're fighting about, who took out the trash yesterday, right? To use a stupid example. And all of a sudden it gets thrown out of, well, and another thing you do is X, Y, Z. Well, no. We were arguing about the trash being taken out. So let's deal with that, not carrying over things that happened in the past or something that really isn't pertinent to the situation. So you want to focus on what the conflict is really, really about. And here's the other thing, and this wasn't in my notes: judge methods, not motives. Like when somebody comes in with a conflict, you can judge maybe how they're acting. You can judge, maybe if they did this here, not that. That's a method thing. But don't start saying, well, I think there's something wrong with your heart, or I think you're evil, or I think, no. Deal with the method of what's going on, not necessarily the motive, unless there's gross sin or evident sin. Then you may need to deal with that. And then the final suggestion I would make in dealing with conflict is this: remember the law of love and the rule of grace. Really, the golden rule applies here, right? Do unto others as they would do unto you. And so when you're dealing with conflict, I know when I'm at odds with somebody, I want them to have grace on me. I want them to show love to me. I'm really not trying to be the enemy. And so when I deal with people in conflict here, or when they're battling each other, I try to remind them that really, if we're brothers and sisters in Christ, we're under the law of love and we're ruled by grace, meaning that if we get the conflict resolved, I'm going to have grace. I'm not going to bring it up anymore. All is forgiven. And I'm also grace also means that I'm, again, going to think the highest of you and really seek resolution for the glory of God. I hope this has been helpful to you today. Again, better a man of self-control than a warrior who takes the city, meaning slow down when you're dealing with conflict. It's not about winning. It is about having self-control to the glory of God. Again, if this was helpful for you today, we would love for you to share it on your social media platform. Until the next time, see you later.